Wireless telegraphy, as it was called, didn't come to the Great Lakes until 1903. Marine Review reported that the big passenger steamer City of Erie was the first to try out this newfangled telegraph. The City of Erie managed to receive a message some 30 miles out onto Lake Erie. Seen here is the City of Erie with her wireless antenna. One of the first proponents to push the installation of a network of wireless devices on the lakes was Thomas E. Clark. He actually manufactured wireless sets that companies could buy and install. By 1908, his sets were compact enough that large vessels could easily apply the technology for use aboard ship. One of the earliest adapters of the wireless telegraph was the Pierre Marquette fleet of railroad car ferries. They figured that the wirelesses would be more efficient in communicating with their fleet than the previously accepted method, carrier pigeons. Seen in this postcard is their Pierre Marquette number 19 ferry. Notice that the antenna array for the vessel's wireless is illustrated. Although the maritime fleet owners thought that wireless had potential, to those in the newspaper business, wireless would soon demonstrate that it was their favorite tool. There were, however, a lot of Great Lakes captains who swore that they would never allow that newfangled contraption on their boat. It was considered to be a way for fleet managers to interfere with a captain's authority over his own vessel. In 1910, such a debate did not apply to Captain L.A. Rand. He had previously been a captain for the big Hawgood fleet, where these sorts of struggles between vessel captains and vessel owners were quite frequent. Now, in the final days of September, he found himself wearing both hats. He was the captain and part owner of the freighter Frank L. Vance as she sat in Toledo unloading a cargo of wheat taken on at Duluth Superior. Constructed at Cleveland, Vance was launched on Saturday, September 24, 1887. Her wooden hull was 272 feet in overall length and was strengthened with diagonal steel strapping and arches. One of her main features was a brand new steam assist steering system. After she was launched, Captain Tinney had brought her out. He had just come from her slightly older sister ship, the steamer Roswell P. Flower. Both vessels belonged to the Milwaukee Steamship Company. The difference in the two being the Vance had been constructed by William Radcliffe in Cleveland, while the Flower was simultaneously being built in Milwaukee by the company of Wolfe and Davidson. Both vessels worked the long-haul ore, grain, and coal trades. They did quite well for their vessel owners until about 1908. Then bulk cargo prices were greatly depressed, and as a result, both the Vance and the Flower were idle for not only the 1908 season, but also for the 1909 season. Over the winter of 1909-1910, Captain Rand, Mr. R.C. Helm, and a few other enterprising Duluth businessmen decided to form the Fay Steamship Company. Of course, you cannot have a steamship company without having a steamship. There just happened to be two fairly senior steamships laid up at Vance and Joy's of Milwaukee. Thus, as the 1910 Great Lakes shipping season opened, the new Fay Steamship Company was operating the Vance, and her captain was the part owner, L.A. Rand. By the end of September, the boat had earned her way quite well. But as she sat for nearly 3 days, slowly unloading her wheat cargo in Toledo, her captain knew too well that the actual profit for the season would be earned as the season closed in November. Now as the Vance squatted at the elevator and the Dart's legs chewed slowly away at her cargo, he knew that every hour was eating away at his 1910 profit. As best I can interpolate, the reason why the Vance took some 4 days to unload at Toledo was that she had to wait for the big steel steamer James P. Walsh to finish unloading at that same dock. The moment that the final bushel of wheat was scooped from the Vance's cargo hold, Captain Rand ordered her lines cast off, and he headed for the coal dock there in Toledo. In 1910, the Hocking Valley coal dock, as well as the T&O coal dock, had Brown hoist type coal loading equipment. Coal cars rolled into the unloader and were locked onto the tracks. Steam powered the lifting cradle, which picked up the section of track upon which the coal car was parked. The entire rig was then rolled over. All of the coal was dumped into a large bucket, which also sat on a different set of rails. That bucket was rolled down to the hoist, lifted up, and extended out over the open cargo hold. Once there, the bucket's trap door bottom was opened, and the coal was allowed to simply drop out into the lake boat. Records conflict, but it appears that she took on about 2,500 tons of coal that day. Giving one single long blast on the whistle, Captain Rand ordered her lines cast off once again. Her destination now was Milwaukee. In modern times, vessels carrying fuel sport large signs written in red that state flammable, and their crews know that they are sailing with a cargo that could easily burst into a horrific fire at any time. Such is rare, but it has happened. Case in point being the motor vessel Jupiter on the Saginaw River on September 16, 1990. In 1910, however, vessels commonly carried coal that was not only their fuel, but also their cargo, both of which were highly combustible. But rarely did anyone consider it with caution. At 9:45 on the morning of October 4th, 1910, Edward S. Lamb was sitting by his telegraph key at the United Wireless Telegraph Company in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Suddenly his receiver came to life. As easily as others may hear and understand music, Lamb's ears took in and decoded the message. As quick as he could, Lamb took a pencil and began transcribing code into written words. It said, Pier Marquette Car Ferry 19. Steamer. Frank L. Vance. Is a fire. Near Ludington. Of course, the Kenosha station was not the only one listening. In Milwaukee, a wireless station had been set up high atop the Pabst Brewery, and they were listening and picked up the broadcast as well. The wireless operators quickly turned to the landline telegraph, and local newspapers picked up the story. It was all in time to be reported in their evening editions. As the morning rolled on, it was reported by the radio officer of the Pier Marquette 19 that their vessel was on the scene and had fire hoses on the burning Vance. Additionally, it was reported that the steamer Maggie Marshall, a wooden lumber hooker, was also on the scene. She belonged to the Lewis Sands Salt and Lumber Company and had removed all of the Vance's crew, except for Captain Rand. As part owner of the Vance, Captain Rand was refusing to leave his boat. Captain Neil McIsaac of the Pierre Marquette 19 was determined to keep fighting the fire, and he kept his crew on the hoses. Finally, Captain Rand left his boat and evacuated to the Marshall. The final message from the Pierre Marquette 19 stated that, in fear that the Vance's boilers may explode, the big car ferry was departing and rejoining her route. Soon, Captain Andrew Olson of the Marshall decided that it was time for his boat to also depart. When last seen, the Vance was about 20 miles southwest of Ludington and was burning out of control. Once ashore, the Vance's crew explained that Captain Rand had directed his boat into Ludington Harbor the previous evening. A storm was blowing, and he found Ludington to be a good place to shelter. Just after dawn the following day, the winds had died to the point where the Vance could head out toward Milwaukee once again. Within 2 hours, smoke was found coming up through the boat's wooden hatch covers. When the crew opened the hatches to check, it provided a draft to feed the fire, and the smoldering coal cargo burst into flames. Almost immediately, the entire midship was afire. Passing nearby, Captain Olson on the Maggie Marshall saw the smoke and directed his boat toward the rescue. Soon after that, the Pierre Marquette No. 19 arrived, having been alerted by the smoke in the distance. The Marshall had one hose on the fire, and the big steel ferry continually had 3 hoses, but it was no use. Some 2,500 tons of coal was viciously burning in the Vance's hold. Nothing other than the inrush of Lake Michigan when the steamer sank could have extinguished it. Interestingly, no one saw the Vance go down that morning. For the newspaper editors, it was a great story to quickly publish. Thanks to the wireless, combined with the long-used telegraph system, papers as far away as Lincoln, Nebraska, Iowa City, Iowa, Lexington, Kentucky, and Falls River, Massachusetts, were able to publish the story on the same day that it happened. In 1910, that was a huge bookmark in Great Lakes history. Although the Milwaukee Journal headlines stated that the Pierre Marquette was alerted to the fire by wireless, the fact is it was the opposite way around. Pierre Marquette No. 19 saw the fire and then alerted the news media. The crew of the Vance was in fact rescued by good old-fashioned seamanship of Captain Andrew Olson. Yet, this was the first Great Lakes shipwreck covered in the news media live from the scene. And it was done by that newfangled contraption called wireless.